I thought that I would maybe talk a little about every day being a good day. I sit every morning here, uh, or wherever I am, and have for over 3.5 years, I haven't missed a single morning. And over 3.5 years is sort of a discipline. And I sit for 25 or 30 minutes, and then I say a lot of prayers. I call them prayers. It's really just sort of going through the list of people that I'm affectionate with and really love. And the first one on the list is my sister and her husband in Atlanta. And I always start that prayer by saying, good morning, Jack and Deidre. Another good day coming your way. And then I go on and say a little few things about it and stuff. But anyway, every day I acknowledge that it's another good day. And that doesn't have anything to do with me or my circumstances at all. It is, in my mind, it's just that I have been gifted with an enormous privilege of being a human being and alive. And it's not a permanent situation, and nothing is a permanent situation. And so I realize that every day that comes around in this life of mine is a good day. You know, it's an opportunity for me to be here, be alive, feel love, be loved. It's just, that's just the way it is. It really has nothing to do with, you know, whether I had wrecked my car or whether I missed a deadline or any of the things that are so trite and trivial. They don't seem to have much effect on whether the day is a good day or not. That's just my own preferences and prejudices and opinions that I would think of as not being good. But at any rate, that's sort of how I see the idea of every day is a good day. And I firmly understand that at this point in my life. So I'm delighted to be alive and participating in one good day after another. It's rather nice. Another thing that's of interest to me is about the concept of being present in these good days. And I know so much of my time is spent thinking in my head about one thing or another. And I realized too that in order to be present, I need to be engaged with what is happening around me and with me. And so the practice in a big way is to let go of thoughts when they're not appropriate, when that's not being present. And it's become so much more effortless to be able to do that. I actually attribute that to sort of the consistency of morning practice more than anything else these days. Because I haven't been to a retreat, literally, in over a year and a half. I think the last retreat I was in was 2 years ago in December. And it's coming up on 2 years again. And so the principal part of my practice is this morning practice that I do. And then the continued practice during the day of paying attention to what my mind's doing, what my mind's thinking, whether I want to hold on to that or whether I want to let that go. And so it just makes practice continuous. as best it can be. I'm not trying to say I don't get lost in my thoughts. I do, of course, and I battle with depression. It's part of what goes on with me. But I am saying that it's become uh, far more transparent now, and it's a consequence of the practice. I know that most of you have experienced this. It's, I think, everyone who does a meditation practice cannot help but experience uh, the increase in presence and the awareness and the mindfulness that comes with it. So that's a big part of it's a big part of my practice is daily, hourly, daily, every moment when it's possible, be aware of what my head is doing, and without any judgments, but nonetheless with the capacity to allow that to drift away, which I can do, and we all probably are becoming accomplished at that. It's a real blessing, this practice. So that was a piece of what I wanted to talk about, being present. In the moment, which is actually, in my thinking anyway, the moment is the only present. Anything else is really conjuring something that has happened or something that you feel might happen. And the moment is sort of a timeless element. It's what gives rise to emptiness, essentially. At least that's how I feel about it. This moment is timeless. There's not a beginning and an end. A moment. Everything arises in a moment. But there is no time there. And so it reminds me, and I've mentioned this before, but when I was a child, one thing, and it persisted for several years, a question that I wanted to ask about things was, because I recognized the complexity of things as a kid, and it still seems enormously complex. And I wondered often, why is there everything rather than nothing? And so one of the answers that I've given myself as a consequence of this practice and my concept and idea about moment being essentially a timeless thing with no beginning and no end, is it in that moment there is nothing. There is nothing. And so that it appears that, as they say in the sutras, form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. And that's in a rather real and physical way. That is the way things are. So there is nothing essentially outside of the moment. But the moment doesn't exist for a length of time. Therefore, there's nothing. And that's quite an interesting concept. Most people would find that generally appalling. But to me, it answers a childhood question. So I'm okay with it. I'm okay with that concept. If there is nothing. Now, so I live down here in Macon, and I have a really small sangha of 3 women, roughly my age. I'm 76. And we meet once on Sunday at 6 p.m. and we sit for 30 minutes. And if anybody wants to know anything about the Dharma, and I can answer their questions, I do. That's rare. And then we go right from there into sitting around and drinking wine and eating crackers and cheese. So it's really sort of a bit of a social event, but it's sort of the only game in town in Macon, Georgia. And so it's it's also part of my practice. And I'm not, opposed to there being a lot more people involved, but just right now I'm not out, soliciting members for this Zen group of mine. But we do the sitting, and we do periodically discuss the Dharma, which is, of course, unavoidable anyway. It's omnipresent. It's kind of hard to get away from the Dharma. Everything seems to be teaching, and when we pay attention, we can see. We can see clearly. I live alone here in this house, and I have 1.5 acres of land, and I get out and about and do a lot of gardening and landscaping and so forth, as well as I work on the house. I'm an architect, and I build things. I love building things, and I work on the house a lot. And I have come to understand that all of these things that I do, the day in, day out, are Dharma teaching, and it's really enriched my life considerably to be able to recognize all of these teachings, not all of them, of course, but to be able to recognize the teachings as they present themselves about how absolutely incredibly perfect this creation is, how everything is following and everything is connected, completely connected. So I've put myself actually in a very interesting spot, not that it was intentional. I never ever thought that I would be living in Macon, Georgia again. And I didn't plan to. When I inherited this house, I was coming down here to fix it up, make it rentable, and come back to Colorado, where I lived for 37 years. And I just sort of fell in love with the house and the idea of fussing with it and working on it. And it turned into a real blessing. I always thought that it would be ideal to spend the last years of my life working on a project that was not going to get finished. And I didn't know what that would be, but I'm very glad to be here now. And I realize that this project will never get finished, but that is just exactly what I wanted. And the process, which has become all inclusive, the process is a constant teaching. The Dharma arises in everything. It's always here. So that's been a real blessing for me.